Long before the sands of time, our hero was wandering a dungeon for just 60 minutes. Today on Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Press B to Cancel. I am joined by the ever-ready GP,
Hi, I'm ready. I'm here.
Sinistar,
Hi, I'm having a good Friday.
Chardmonk,
Really pumped about my credit score, guys. Let's do this.
We all are.
and an echoey Jake, for he just moved.
I'm aiming for that low 400s, baby. That's what I want. That low 400s.
It's a sick Jake cave.
Hopefully everybody is doing well tonight.
Yeah.
We are talking about Prince of Persia this week.
And only Prince of Persia this week.
Yes, we're doing a little bit more focused of an episode this week. And I assure you there will be tangents.
With this group,
Us?
yes.
Tangents? Us?
Tangents,
can't
variance,
without tangents.
coefficients,
Yeah, sine waves.
Signs,
math, trig.
algebraic. Anyway,
I got that reference.
Got it.
all right. This is a game that I have minimal experience with in my history. I have played, I want to say 2 versions, but not a lot. And not in like 20 years. Wow. No, 30 years. Holy goodness. It's been a while.
We might be old. Yeah.
It actually did just pass its 30-year anniversary. So
Did it really? Okay.
yeah, 1989. So,
I feel pretty good being 10 years older than so I guess it's
Which
like that.
I got to say that's very fitting because I believe the 30-year anniversary is, in fact, the sand anniversary. So it's apropos.
Apropos. I thought it was
Apropos.
clocks personally, but I could be wrong.
Hourglasses?
Maybe.
Meet in the
That's
middle,
the
meet in the
mix.
middle.
That's the mix up.
Yeah. It's the Jafar anniversary.
It's the golden cobra.
When the evil villain comes in to celebrate your wedding. No, you don't want that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was. I gotta say, when I watched the intro to Prince of Persia in preparation for this week, I was getting major Disney's Aladdin vibes.
It's
I'm
almost
sure there's
like
some
guys
spin-off
at
folklore,
Disney
yeah.
were like, "Hey," and I know it's inspired by 1001 Arabian Nights or something like
Right.
that.
yeah.
But it seemed like they had also just recently played the game or something and drew some of the things directly from it. I don't know.
I just assumed every evil warlock in that time frame was named Jafar, like we have John Smith, essentially. It's just a common name.
Jafar Smith. Yeah.
But
Jafar Smith.
I mean, I guess it's as simple as the Prince of Persia is technically Aladdin, at least at that point in time, even though
fairly close.
he was given a name, but I think only in the movie.
Jake Gyllenhaal, yes.
Yeah, he played I'm probably not pronouncing this correctly, but it was Dastan or
Dastan. Yeah,
Dastan.
Dastan. Yeah.
I've not seen the movie.
I have.
I haven't known.
That's all I bring to the table is the movie. I got you.
You're absolutely correct. By the way, the protagonist was actually specifically nameless in the original game.
Yeah. So, well, Sinistar, would you like to start us off on this since you have probably the most experience out of all of us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I played this on the original hardware. So this was developed and released for the Apple II series. It specifically, when I went back and kind of reviewed it, it requires specifically a 2E. So that was kind of the after the 2 and the 2 Plus. So it required it because it did actually use more RAM than was available on those early machines. Specifically, the 2E had an enhancement card with a little bit of extra RAM, which is important, and we can talk about that in a minute. But it was developed kind of late in the cycle on the Apple II, But I also, as a kid, my first gaming computer was an Apple II, and much like this game, I kind of was kind of late into the I held on to my Apple II late into the cycle and didn't actually switch over to DOS gaming till probably I don't know, after it had been a platform for a while. Anyway, but what's kind of interesting is so Jordan Mechner, who created this game, it's kind of a spiritual successor to an earlier game that he did when he was in college, and we probably should talk about that. Karateka, and both are very similar in kind of their visual style. Specifically, he used a technique that it's funny you talk about Aladdin and stuff like that. He used a technique that Disney used for quite a while,
Yeah.
which was rotoscoping. And so specifically the way that he did it is, and this was pre VHS, and this is, if you go back and watch some of his history discussions, he talks about how Prince of Persia was specifically filmed on VHS, but the reason that it's kind of important is the earlier one, he actually had to kind of throw up on a screen. He recorded it on an earlier technology. He had to throw it up on a screen, and he had to literally trace every frame. And so and this was actually his karate instructor that he filmed. And then he took and basically, frame by frame wrote these moves. And then what's interesting on the original Karateka, and by the way, I called it Karateka as a kid because we all said karate, right?
You're not alone. Same thing here.
Right.
I'm sure you're not.
But what's interesting is it's a much simpler platform because essentially the character and the enemies are exactly the same sprites with just like different helmets. So
Simpler.
hold on. That's how it was in Tecmo Bowl as well. I just want to say that.
He's right. He's right. There's at least 11 men on the field, and they're just colors and shapes by this point.
Tecmo Bowl is Karateka, which I know it's Karateka. I'm choosing to refer to it as Karateka. So sorry, go ahead.
I think there's a
No
store
problem.
named that down the street from me.
Nice.
Yeah,
Karateka.
probably.
No, it's Karateka.
Yeah.
So
Anyway,
it's funny
yeah.
that I actually asked the guys here if they had heard of the 2012 remake of Karateka, and it's funny because that's the first time I had ever heard of the game. The forums I frequented in that period of time were all excited about this game being remade, and I was like, "What is this game?"
It's actually I have very fond memories of Karateka or Karateka. You know what? I'm just going to call it Karateka because that's what I did for like 20 years until I learned that it was something else. Anyway, sorry, Jordan Mechner. It's a consumable game in one sitting. In fact, there's no save system. If I remember right, there's literally like 2 levels. You can complete it in probably 25 to 30 minutes. It's
Well,
a very
you
simple
can.
concept. There's
I couldn't.
I
I used to play
right?
this.
Oh,
I got nowhere.
Here we
I don't know
go,
if I can watch that
inadvertently
long.
shitting on Jake's gaming skills again.
Again.
Hey,
What the hell?
we gotta get the stab in there.
I mean, it's better than Wily Wars for sure. But
Well,
Is it
that goes
though?
without saying. Yeah.
You say Karateka.
It's at least better
I say
than Circus Charlie.
Cool spot.
Anyway, it's well worth playing. I probably will play the remake because it was a great game. It had some novel concepts, like it was a fighting game back when there was kung fu on the Atari. Or what was the other one? Karate? Wasn't it Karate,
Karate
Master?
was-
or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karate.
It was an
I mean,
arcade, I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it had a lot of fun things in it. I know we're supposed to be talking about Prince of Persia, but I wanted to point out that there is a fun part at the end where you're trying to save a princess. You go through this, this temple. You kill the end boss, and then you go into the room where the princess is, and in the game you can either have a standing non-karate pose, or you can have a karate pose. And if you go up to the princess in karate pose, she kills you in one kick.
As you
Oh,
do,
fuck.
yeah.
How did they kidnap her?
Well, that was the joke as a kid. Is we were always like, why didn't she self-rescue?
She wanted to be there, just like Peach.
Is that what it is? Is that how
No
it
idea.
works?
The story's wrong. The story's wrong.
She was running the joint.
He got the wrong email. It was broken up. He just assumed.
Also,
Yeah, go ahead.
I love how the kidnapped princess in that game is so dramatic too, because as soon as they close the door on her when they throw her in the cell,
Oh,
she instantly just collapses to the
He
floor.
gets a case of the vapors and passes out.
Okay, she's not there on the floor the whole time. I think very clearly, as soon as the screen cuts out and goes to the game, she is diligently training on that kick.
She must be. It took the protagonist so long to get
Yeah.
out that she was ready to just bust chops out.
Well, that's that Bruce Lee
yeah.
quote, right? Like, don't be afraid of the person who practices 1,000 kicks one time. Be afraid of the person who practices one kick 1,000 times. Like,
Right.
that's the princess. That's where that comes
Right.
from.
There's
Bruce
not
Lee.
enough RAM in that system to
Adamant gamer.
able to do that montage of training kicks, unfortunately.
Gonna need a montage.
I was gonna say, if they got a cool montage music, then she's gonna learn it quick.
All right. So in doing my research, I found out that with the success of Karateka, Jordan was given the green light to make another game for I believe it was Broderbund to publish, correct?
Mhm.
And they were expecting a sequel to Karateka, and instead they got Prince of Persia.
Correct.
And
Now-
it doesn't seem like they were disappointed in it in the least, but
No, now I think it was probably a kind of a what you'd consider a project manager these days. This person actually was watching him, produce Prince of Persia, and the whole time he didn't want to actually make a sequel to Karateka, and he very specifically did not include combat in the game, and in fact consumed all of the available resources and RAM and stuff doing the other pieces, the puzzles, the movement, because this is actually a much greater version of rotoscoping than Karateka. And every single time that this project manager would talk to him, she would say to him, "Where's combat?" No, we don't need combat. We don't need combat. We don't need combat. And eventually, and this is actually a fun little bit of history. There is a making of that you can go watch. He finally caved, and he looked at it and he said, "Well, all right, we need to put combat in. I think it does need to happen." And that actually was kind of the fortuitous invention of one of the greatest pieces in that game, which is the Shadow Man. And there's a scene in the game where the Shadow Man's introduced. I'm not going to spoil it. It's actually a really cool scene. And the way that he did it is he looked at it and he said, I consumed all of these resources. We're talking 48K of RAM available. This is substantially small, right? And he found that there actually was on the Apple II hardware, there was an operation that he could do that would essentially set each pixel off by 1. And so when it overlaid, it actually became a shadow of the character.
Huh.
And so he didn't actually have to redo any of the rotoscoping. He didn't have to redo any of the character work. He just literally did that off by 1. And he introduced a character that was a shadow, and it's a very cool looking character. The progression of that shadow character in the game is one of the coolest concepts as well.
It is absolutely mind-blowing watching the videos. I watched like a montage of maybe, the Apple II and then Amiga, Nintendo, and all the stuff, all the stuff that it came out in. And to see, to argue, and we'll get into more discussion about this, I'm sure, about how much almost the Apple II and the Amiga were almost better looking games than like the later stuff in the system. and it's mostly, and maybe it's because of my geekdom or whatever, of it being this game was made in 89 or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks so fluid for a 1989 pixelated game. It's incredible. Like the first time I actually saw it, I went, "No, this wasn't back then. This is just like a dumbed down version on an 8-bit system. It has to be." No, and it looks cool. It's cool to watch.
I wonder if all of us or some of us didn't just watch the same 3.5-hour YouTube video,
Probably did.
We might
which, by
have.
the way, was fantastic.
We all understood the assignment.
Right. So yeah, but none of us have played the game. No. So watching
I have beaten this game. I have beaten this game. Yeah.
So watching the original version with the rotoscoping animations that look so fluid, I was immediately taken back to my first playthrough of Moon Crystal. If you guys remember seeing that game, or if any of you have played that. So I kind of got that feeling like, oh God, I would not like to play this, because Moon Crystal, though I eventually grew to love that game, was so difficult. I should have mentioned that last week when we were talking about the interfering stuff, but everything based on momentum and overly animated everything, and the amount of time it takes just to turn your character around. But then kind of watching the playthrough, I started thinking, no, this is much, much better. But like Chart is saying, much, much earlier. And it's interesting that this was so well done, and then the things that followed it sucked so badly, not just in the series with the sequel, but a lot of just other Apple games or Nintendo games even couldn't pull off what this accomplished, or anyway, it was very cool. And I think, honestly, of everything that I learned about from this 3.5-hour video I watched, the thing that blows my mind is the creator and developer, Mechner. Like, what you talk about, like a Renaissance man, that's it for the modern age. Everything he did, he excelled at, and he had all these other projects going that would probably kill a regular mortal person to have that many high-level, high-performing, high-demand things going, and he just succeeded at all of them. And if you look at the series, really the more successful ones, where the ones where he kind of sat up and said, actually, I do want to be a part of this one. There's a lull in quality when he was away, and then Sands of Time came out, and of course it was great because he had his hand in it.
Absolutely.
He also
Wow.
I just want to say, when it comes to like rotoscoping, like, yeah, when you look at rotoscoped animation in gaming at this year, it does look so much more far advanced than anything else at the time, right? Especially like Nintendo, where you have 3 or 4 frames of animation for a sprite, but this you have so much, it's so fluid. It kind of reminds me how in like films, animated films, how you look at something like the Lord of the Rings movie back in the day, I think it's the 70s, it was rotoscoped, and how it has that oddly realistic like appearance to it that feels unnatural at first, almost too fluid. And that's what I get reminded when I look at Prince of Persia. It's just almost too fluid for the medium.
It's like an uncanny valley sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the same thing with Moon Crystal. Like when I was watching GP play that, I was like, this game is unnaturally fluid for what system it's on. It's weird. You think it's a current game, but like a demake of something, like it's a little bit, it's just been torn down to make it look older, but it's all the technology from today, and that's not even remotely the case. It's the same thing with this. When I saw this one, because we all know Prince of Persia exists. We knew it was there, but I mean, I really didn't get into it, and probably till like Sands of Time, or a little bit later, into like way later, which has nothing to do or like anything like what this did until researching it and looking back and seeing it, going, man, this thing was far above its time. I mean, you got like King's Quest games that you're playing that are pixelated and you're walking around all herky jerky, 84, the first one came out. Then 5 years later, you get this rotoscoping of this extremely fluid game. It's really neat to kind of just watch.
And then this is the only thing I'll say about Karateka. So sorry to keep interjecting. I don't think I'd ever heard about Karate Core or whatever. And then like we started talking about it and doing the research for this week, and 9 different places Karateka came up. And, all these things, even like Gaming Historian, because I've kind of been going through and watching all of his episodes. It has nothing to do with anything. And then all of a sudden, somebody's talking about it. And so maybe I have heard of it a million times in my life, but never known what the reference was until, you guys brought that up. And now it's everywhere still.
Yeah. Speaking of, we talk about like the that 1970s Lord of the Rings, a much more modern version of another rotoscoped video or movie, Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
Did any of you guys
Oh,
ever see that?
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And another one
fuck.
of
Good
those,
call.
where like it looks wrong because it looks so right.
Mhm.
I love Scanner Darkly's
Yeah.
animation.
Scanner
That's a
Darkly's great.
cool movie.
Robert Downey Jr., if you're watching, first off, thanks for
Incredible.
watching. Smash that like and subscribe button. But
Fun bit of trivia about that movie. There are little Post-it notes kind of around,
Mhm.
and Robert Downey Jr. used those. He actually used those to for his lines. And then in the movie, they actually the rotoscoping took all of the text off, but he used that for his
Nice.
lines.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's Brando. Brando used to do that.
Yeah.
If you look up some of the trivia for Godfather or even Superman, he's holding a baby and he just wrote his lines on the baby. 100%.
It's
I'm
true.
sorry,
I've actually heard that rumor.
I can't read this. I wrote it in the crack. Hang on.
Right? You see him just like tilting the anyway. Nothing to do with
Brando,
anything.
baby up.
Who smudged the baby?
This baby's made
Fine.
of people. It's
I
made
need you,
of
baby.
people.
That's Heston, not Brando.
They both wore bandanas.
Brando
in their
Heston,
careers.
yes.
Look. It works. It rolls.
Yeah, it totally works.
Okay, so I want to say this is a game, like I said, I played it when I was a kid. I believe my neighbor around the corner had it, a friend of mine, and he had a bunch of DOS games we used to play. And so this was one of them. And it was not a game I had a lot of patience for because I did not grow up playing PC games. I grew up with controllers. So that arrow key thing was always just a not possible transfer of information for my brain. So
Yeah.
I didn't play it a whole lot there, but a couple years later when it came out, I never played it on the NES either, but when it came out on the Super Nintendo, I played that. And I was absolutely terrible at it.
Okay. Was the one on the Super Nintendo the one that was sped up to 150%, or was that Prince of Persia 2?
I don't know about sped up, but they actually increased the number of levels and increased the time that you had to play.
longer,
Yeah, you had twice as much time because it instead of having 12 levels, it has 20 levels.
Yeah.
And it added boss fights. Like
Yeah.
it actually added like a boss gauntlet at the end and numerous different boss fights. And the AI is mostly the same on the bosses. It seems like it might have been changed up a bit here or there, but it's mostly just different sprites.
We should also.
It's funny.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say it's funny that you mentioned controllers and this game because I think most of the footage that Jake is throwing up on the screen is the footage I recorded. I started with the joystick / controller, and first off, because the Apple and the Amiga and stuff like that only had a single button on most of their joysticks, there isn't a jump button in the original ports or the original versions and then the early ports. And so it's that whole like press up to jump, right? And so sometimes I would totally miss because you have to make running jumps. And so you start running, and then you have to like aim your controller the right direction. And sometimes I would miss. And to go to that muscle memory thing, because I did play this on the original Apple II hardware back in the day. I then switched over to the keyboard controls, and I did some additional videos later, and you can see a defined difference in how well I play switching over to the keyboard controls. And part of that is because there is actually it uses the number pad on your keyboard. So most people have a number pad, the 1 through 9, and it uses 4, 5, 6 left, down, and right. And then it uses 7 and 9 and 8 as jumps. So 7 jumps left, like it's an aimed
gross.
jump. 9 is an aimed jump the other direction.
I was like, oh.
Give me a controller,
But
please.
it makes it actually makes it more precise. So
I mean, it makes sense, but
yeah,
I like to compartmentalize my stuff, and We're just throw it all into the up button. If you're gonna make me push the up button, make me use one up button. Don't make me decide on, hey, I'm running forward. Oh crap, I pressed 9. He backflips and do some spikes. That doesn't compute in my head. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
I
That's fair.
can't turn on a dime like that, man.
It's probably muscle memory. Oh,
Yeah.
speaking of turning on a dime, that's one of the coolest rotoscoping animations. If you're running one direction and you press the other way, watch the character do the slide turn.
That's cool.
Real quick,
It's
while
very
we're
slick,
while we're touching on rotoscoping as well. So he recorded his brother doing the running, sliding, dying, like falling and dying, stuff like that. But when he got to the point that he introduced combat in, his brother had already moved away and he was trying to figure out how to do it. And so he ended up pulling 6 seconds of footage from 1938's Robin Hood with Errol Flynn.
Oh, wow.
There is a fight scene, a fencing fight scene. So all of the fights are based on that 6 seconds. He rotoscoped that scene. They're in profile. They're like, yeah.
That's crazy.
So while the Super Nintendo game is still on the screen for those watching on YouTube, I do want to mention the animation does not look nearly as good on the Super Nintendo as previous versions. And
it's way choppier.
It still has a lot of frames of animation, and theoretically it should be smooth still.
No,
but
it's
for
clunky,
some reason,
though.
it's clunky and it's kind of got a sort of squiggle vision to it.
Yeah.
Now, squiggle vision is a term I pull from, if you ever saw those cartoons, Home Movies or Dr. Katz.
Dr. Katz,
The way they were all
Medicine
drawn really squiggly and it was like new frames. That's squiggle vision. That's what they called it. Or it's kind of like Ed, Ed, and Eddie or something like that, where they're not always completely in the same position they were in the previous frame as far as where the line exactly is. And that's what I see in this is the way they animated it. It looks really bad because it's rotoscoped animation, but then it looks squiggly and incomprehensive.
Yeah. It's like they took the rotoscoped animation and they're like, how do we make this into a sprite for the Super Nintendo?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
We're going to throw a bunch of shit on top of it to make it look more modern, but try and keep it with its, its old school artwork style. And and it just makes it look it's too much going on.
Mm-hmm. It's the shading on the pixels jumps around a lot, and I think that affects it. And then for some reason, it feels like the animation is mixed about a little bit and not completely seamless like in previous versions.
You know what it looks like to me? It looks like clay animation.
It kind of, yeah.
It's like it's stop motion a little bit, and just
I can kind of see that.
But I get it. That's how it looks to me.
But
Parks and Rec, where he was working on that clay animation. He's like, I've been working on this for like 3 weeks, and it's like 2 seconds.
Stand in the place.
Yeah, it's stand.
Sorry, you two.
Sorry, you two.
Yeah, it's the Super Nintendo version does not seem nearly as good. It seems like they tried to gear it towards Super Nintendo platforming players at the time, and it's not really a game built like that.
No.
And I do want to mention, I watched a long play of the Game Boy version today, and I was really impressed with that. It looks like it's basically the same game as the original, just 4 shades of black and gray,
Right.
or green if you played it back then or whatever.
You want to take a guess who did the music for that one?
For the Super Nintendo?
No, for the Game Boy version.
Danny Elfman.
No idea. I didn't hear a whole lot of music.
Well, for the little actors there, Tommy Tallarico.
That was my next guess.
Games.
I was going to guess Trent Reznor, so I was way off.
Wow.
That would explain why the soundtrack makes me feel things.
Yeah.
But yeah,
why am I stressed playing this game all the time?
The animation on the Game Boy is super smooth, and everything is really readable, except for one thing. So there are potions in the Prince of Persia games, correct?
Yes. And there are
they look
types.
Different, correct?
Yes, there are multiple types.
Oh.
So on the Game Boy, they don't. It's all the exact same sprite. It
That's
does.
at
The
work.
potions do 4 different things.
Yes.
Now, in the
That's
manual,
how they work. Just be cool with it.
this is. I want to tell you how ridiculous this is. In the manual, it says something along the lines of, basically, try to infer what the potion will do based on where it's located.
Oh,
What?
Jesus.
What?
What?
Wow.
That makes no
So you don't know if
sense.
it's gonna poison you, refill all your health,
Oh,
and give you an extra.
wait.
Give you
Hold
1
on.
health, or
Hold
whatever the
on.
other thing was.
Let me stop this train.
Increase your health by 1 point.
There's a potion that can harm you.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the original game, it's different colored. In fact,
Mhm.
I have nothing to say.
in fact, there's actually an easy way to tell if it's a good potion because your character's health is shown as a blue arrow, and the blue potions are the good ones.
Except if you're playing on Game Boy. You know the best
Right.
way to find
Yeah.
out if it's a good potion? You're alive after you take it. You don't have
Yeah.
to do it all over again.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Memorize
Then you just
where
write it
was
in
and
the
don't
book.
take it
Don't
again,
go
stupid.
there.
That's the plan they give you.
Don't drink
Memorize
at
the
that
levels.
fucking bar.
Yeah,
Stupid.
I thought that was absolutely stupid. I was like, really? You're gonna throw various types of potions in a game where you can't tell the difference between the potions? You're just supposed to infer whether they're good or bad,
I think I just had
or
a really. I'm
memorize what
sorry.
they were, I guess. And
Wow.
so I'm watching this Let's Play, and the person playing keeps picking up potions, and the animation for drinking the potion, super smooth.
Mhm.
You see his
Mhm.
belly get a little distended as he chugs it down. It's really neat animation, but like he's picking him up in some spots, and I'm like, oh, that one's gonna be bad for him, and it recovers all his health. I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed.
I
It was
didn't
right
know
next to a
anything about
skeleton. That would tell me it's bad, but okay.
The skeleton just didn't get there fast enough, apparently.
Yeah, he
That's why
died
it's
just
there.
as he was coming upon it. That poor sap.
You were to
You
say
know those-
something, JP?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just thinking of like a fun TikTok video. You have a colorblind bomb defusal specialist playing red wire, green wire.
That's
It's that,
terrible.
right? But with potions.
Sure.
It's basically, I mean, I was gonna say before, I mean, nothing's gonna be perfect, and especially, but it's almost like if you take the game and you put it back down to its like rudimentary, or you, I don't want to say dumb it down, but you take away all the bells and whistles that the Super Nintendo trying to put on it, it makes it better. It's almost like the further back in the past you go with this game, the better it begins to look. I think out of all the
Yeah.
ones that I watched, I think the Amiga one was my favorite looking and sounding one out of
I have
the
to
crew.
agree with that.
It's pretty crazy.
I really liked the because I played this on multiple ports to prep, and I really liked the DOS version with the MT32 MIDI. That one to me had kind of the most because it used an actual MIDI device that had MIDI voices in the device.
But there wasn't that much music in the game, though, right?
No, in fact, the Super Nintendo is the only one that has music, at least of the bunch I played. No, it actually uses some of the voices on the MT32 to do things like the footstep sounds and the sword fighting sounds and the gate crashing sounds and stuff like that.
I want to be the sword fighting sound guy.
Nailed it. Fucking nailed it.
That was a sword
got
fight.
it.
Best sword fight you've ever seen.
Glad
Here's-
this is an
okay.
audio podcast. We got this nailed.
Here's my
So-
question.
Go ahead.
Okay. There's a point that I'm asking here, and you guys, we've briefly talked about. Has everybody read or listened to the audiobook of Ready Player One?
Yes.
Yeah.
Reddit, yeah.
Is Prince of Persia? Because I'm not remembering it. Is it mentioned in there anywhere? Because given the impact of this in the history of video games, seems like something that should be there. And the reason that I ask that is I really don't have a desire to go back and play this, having watched so many videos this week. No. Not because I don't have an interest in the game, but it's so fun to watch people play this.
Yeah.
I would rather watch. However, the minute the Oasis becomes a reality, this is the first game I definitely want to play. And it's kind of unique that way. And then I think back, was it mentioned at all in RPO? And I just don't remember it.
I don't
think so.
remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recall it being mentioned in there.
I feel like GP's right. I'd be kind of shocked. I don't remember it myself, but I do remember as a child and a young adult literally knowing what Prince of Persia was
Mhm.
because it was on everything. It was
On
Yeah.
every
everywhere in
platform.
gaming,
Yeah.
and I never played it as a kid, but I knew it was everywhere. You could play it on anything,
It's
basically.
kind of like Rush, right?
Yeah.
Like very
Yeah.
lofty ideas and goals, and Rush is like everybody's best kept secret. And Prince of Persia is kind of that way too, yeah?
Right.
Everybody's aware of it. Nobody really talks about it that much, but we all kind of secretly dig on this shit.
Right.
Um,
That's a good analogy, as a
I
matter of
love Rush,
fact.
by the way, yeah.
Yeah.
you actually talk about this is ported everywhere, which I touched on earlier a little bit, and that the reason that it actually is important that it was ported everywhere is Mechner, when he talks about the making of, by the time he got this done on the Apple II, he looked at it and he's like, I think I've written something that is going to, like, it's too late. Like the Apple II is already being phased out. The quantity of sales is going to be abysmal. And and there was some truth of that. And he actually talks about how the porting of this saved this game.
I mean, if you look at the official port releases, there
It's
is
everything. Everything.
Yeah,
not even that, every year, 1989, obviously the first one, 1990, 91, 91, 92, 92, 93,
Yeah.
94. And then after 94, there's a small break because, the Game Boy Color needs to be invented. And they make it on that, and they take a break from that.
Wait,
And they,
wait. On the Game Boy Color, you might be able to figure out what the potions are.
you will now, so they fix that problem. But then 2007, phones that can play games need to come out, so that's when it comes out there. It's years of literally of just this port, but nothing.
Port
I mean, other than some upgrades to the graphics and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that changes to it. I mean, it's still the
Right.
same thing. It's just they almost splash more color into it, maybe make it a little bolder.
Well, and we should touch on actual successors to this, actual follow-ups to this, because there were a number of games that came specifically, I think probably 2003 was when Sands of Time came out, which, by the way, I loved Sands of Time. I absolutely adored Sands of Time. And Mechner was involved in that.
Right.
So
That's
that
what
is
kind of brought him back to the franchise.
Yeah. But very different game. I mean, it still has that puzzle jump, platform, but it really is a successor with a little bit of that kind of spiritual level of successor because it is quite different. But fantastic game.
Well, so there were actually 2 direct sequels to Prince of Persia before it got the reboot with Sands of Time. There was a Prince of Persia 2, which I don't know a whole lot about, because when I found out that there was a Prince of Persia 3D released in 1999, nobody was still throwing 3D for console releases on their game in 1999. So I immediately my brain was like, okay, Prince of Persia 3D was released in 1999 for PC and Dreamcast. This is going to be terrible. So I had to look it up. And in the first so the gameplay seems to be very much inspired by the original, where you're running around and you have to line up with the ledge above you and do the jump for heaven kind of grasp up to a ledge, as long as you're perfectly aligned, very much Tomb Raider, and continue exploring. Except there's people you can talk to and they're voiced, which I thought was interesting. But the game is ugly even for the time. And in the first, I want to say 5 minutes of the first level, you go from being in a prison dungeon through what looks to be an aqueduct, caves, and then a catacomb, and then back into the prison. Like, this is all new territory you're exploring, and you're literally spending 2 rooms per. And they keep changing the environment on you. It's very confusing and does not convey anything very well.
Yeah. So Prince of Persia 3D accomplished for video games what Jaws 3D accomplished for movies.
It propelled it forward in a significant manner, is what you're saying.
Yes.
I have the
It was
most
the
smart ass comment I could ever make, but I'm gonna.
it was the shark roar of the franchise.
Yeah, the credit
You're
score on that was low. I'll say
You're
it that way.
saying it might have jumped the shark?
Nice.
It'll fall
Yeah,
off in 7 years. It's fine.
it was
Still waiting
it
for
did
that one to
not look
dip.
like a good game, and apparently the sales were pretty abysmal on that one.
So I
But
guess
Jordan Mechner,
Mhm.
sorry, Chard, what were you gonna say?
no, don't worry. You lead in.
Oh,
I
he
was still in space.
he was involved in the first one, of course. He developed that one. I believe he was involved in the second one, and he was involved in the
He
third
was.
one. But with the sales of the third one, he kind of lost interest in doing it anymore, I think. That and he had, after doing the first game, he went to film school at NYU. So,
Hmm.
he was kind of pursuing a different sort of career path than that anyway. He did come back to do Sands of Time, but then he
Yeah.
didn't do the subsequent games because I'm not entirely sure why, but I know he was disappointed in the tone they took with the subsequent games after Sands of Time. But then
I
he
have
was
to
also
admit.
part of the script writing process for the movie.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, did
Okay.
he? Okay.
Huh. Well,
This-
I mean,
I-
if you look at Sands of Time and then you look at Warrior Within, which is the sequel to the Sands of
Uh-huh.
Time, or it's not the sequel, but it's the one after it. There is a distinct difference in gameplay because you feel
Yes.
like Sands of Time plays like a puzzle game
Right.
and less action. I mean, it's action; it's still action oriented, but it feels like a 3D full view version of Prince of Persia, where you're trying to solve these platforming puzzles to get through it. And
Yep.
if you mess up, you can reverse time and try it again, which I thought that was an awesome concept.
Mhm.
But then they released Warrior Within, and it was more fighting. It was more action packed. It was more getting
And had a
into stuff.
mechanism that I despised. Warrior Within had a mechanism I absolutely hated, where your evil half or whatever would bring
yeah.
itself forward, and you were on a time clock to get from point A to point Z.
Yeah.
And they built it so that it was like frame perfect.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah, I remember that.
And this
Do you
happened
know-
multiple times.
Do you know where the idea for the do-over Sands of Time thing came from?
Mm-mm.
It came from the director had just got really frustrated in playing Donald Duck going quackers. And he's like, there needs to be a do-over mulligan kind of function.
That Genesis
so-
classic.
So he ended up saying, no, we're gonna reverse time here and give people a do-over function.
Was that the successor to Quackshot?
I don't know. I don't
That's
know.
it. That's it. Give him a button on the controller that reverses time.
I want
Yeah.
I want one that speeds up and makes me forget this.
Yeah. Somebody get Mechner on the line.
And get
Give me
Mechner on the
Mechner.
line. Get this guy out of here. I love how
It's great
all our
because the
directors are like
rewind
mob
button is
bosses.
like a huge emulated feature, right? A lot of people love the rewind functionality. There was was it Forza
Well,
that has
Braid
rewind now?
bought it in.
Yeah, there's a few
Oh,
people
yeah.
that have it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Braid used it as a function as well.
Mhm.
So yeah. Well,
I'm
real quick,
always a
getting
big
back to-
fan of time of games that control time. So I was
Yeah.
like, as soon as they're like, "Oh, you can
That's a
control
cool
time in this game," I was like, "Sold."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I gotta
Um,
play Sands of Time, I guess. Anyway, finish
Sands
up.
of Time. Sands of Time is, I have a top 10 list. It's probably 30 games. It's in my top 10. So, yeah.
My top 10 times
well,
3.
I was,
tangents. Go,
I was gonna go back to the original Prince of Persia, because one thing that really was shocking to me when I played it, because 1989. So I was, it was late 1989. So I was 14 years old.
I was
And
65.
and to this point, yeah, there were a couple of games that had blood in a game of any significance, but there are these blade jaw areas that kind of have these serrated gates that close.
Mhm.
And if you go through them, they are insta death, and they leave a streak of blood that every time they move, you can see the streak of blood. And I remember I loved pushing the enemies into them when I was in a battle, and then just leaving that streak of blood. It was it was kind of a visceral thing that I hadn't experienced to that point.
Jeez.
But you don't see
Yeah.
that.
Are you
Nintendo.
okay? Yeah.
Well, just be glad I haven't invented these doors yet.
If you
The enemies are people. The enemies are people.
If you ever need to just chat with somebody, send a
Yeah.
star. You know, my door's open.
My DMs are closed now. Well, you'd slide out of that.
Actually,
blood
is there
transfer,
violence
yes.
in this NES game, or is it like replaced with sweat like a la Mortal Kombat? I don't remember there being that graphic on the console ports.
When I get stabbed with a sword, I sweat heavily.
In Prince of Persia for Super Nintendo, when you strike the enemy, it makes this sort of like little orange blast on them.
Yeah,
It's like a pow.
That actually kind of came.
Pow! Wham!
That kind of came from Karateka. Karateka had that like kind of like little like comic book, like pop when there was a connection of an attack.
And then trumpets play really loud.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that this sort of was the creation of a subgenre for the puzzle platformer, or was there one that did it like this that came before it?
No, this is the genesis of that type, right? Because
Yeah.
there's several games that came after this that are definitely influenced by Prince of Persia.
You don't think Karateka or erotica or whatever it's called it wouldn't be the
No,
because
they
it
had
doesn't
no-
have jumping, right? That's just straight up combat.
Yeah,
and
that's
a
fair. It's
single
more just
plane of
one-on-one combat.
movement,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Prince of Persia has up and
I-
down.
It was
I-
more
puzzle
akin
elements.
to karate.
I get what you're saying though about this being like the genesis of the genre. It's also kind of the mic drop, the gauntlet being laid down, because it was so well done. I'm sorry.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
It kind of had to be its own thing.
Exactly.
Yes, it opened up a genre, but nothing was really like this. Even the sequels weren't exactly. I don't know. It's just
the remakes
fine-tuned.
didn't look as
Yeah.
good as the original. Like they
Yeah.
couldn't even make it better with technology. They were just like, just throw some pixels on it. Screw it. I don't know what else we're gonna do with this thing. We're just gonna make
Yeah.
it look
But-
buffer. Make it fly
Yeah,
a
this is-
carpet around or something.
this is a gameplay formula that we went on to see in stuff like Out of This World / Another World, whatever title you know it as.
Yeah.
Flashback.
Blackthorn.
Blackthorn, yeah.
Even Tomb
I
Raider,
would-
like you said. I think that was mentioned
Yeah,
earlier.
Tomb Raider
has
is
that
kind of
effect.
like a 3D version of it to a degree, except it
Metroid?
it's also got
Except done
guns.
better.
Look.
Metroid.
If
No,
7
Metroid
Up
is a
can
little
be
more-
a platformer, give me this one. please.
Metroid is a little more
Mario
fast
Brothers?
paced, and there's no fall damage in Metroid. You
Yeah.
got to
Well,
remember,
it's outer
like, this
space
is
with it
about
too, yeah.
realism in how far you can fall before you take damage or die.
Okay.
That is
Okay.
something that Mechner thought was important. Was he actually specifically in the documentary talks about how, to this point, and he references like Lode Runner, like your character falls and there's no fall damage, right?
Prince of
And-
Persia, the human condition.
So what you're saying is
Well, yeah, these are-
Bubsy is really just a Prince of Persia sequel. The same
These
genre,
are
really.
it's definitely a gameplay formula that I love, but I don't think I've ever beaten any of those games except for the first Oddworld.
Mm.
Oh, no, that's not true. I have beaten Out of This World. I did
That
beat that.
Flashback
a
is a
few
good
times.
beat too. Flashback's not very long, but it's a fun, really well done game and really great.
It's not very
area
long if you're
environments.
good at it. If you're me, it's the longest
it's
game of
fine.
your life.
I've
and
seen you
I've
play
still
Cuphead.
haven't finished
You can
it.
beat Flashback. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Have I beat
Now-
Cuphead yet? No.
Look, it's not Star
Also,
Ocean.
Can I
I think-
mention, with as bad as Prince of Persia 3D looks, it still looks better than the follow-up to Flashback, Fade to Black.
Yeah, Fade to Black is a game they're going to ignore from canon. There's actually a Flashback 2 coming out, a modern version of it, but apparently it's going to be closer to the original game. So I think they're going to just ignore that 3D game entirely, which is probably
Whoops.
because it looked pretty bad.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, this is the type of game my uncle was always excited to show me when I was a kid. And he was a tech nerd. So
Yeah.
when he got a hold of new games for usually his Amiga, he was like, dude, you gotta see this.
Mm.
And he'd whisk me away to his computer when we got up to his place, and he'd be like, go look at this, and then he'd set me up on it, and then he'd go hang out with my parents while I sat there and played a game.
That's awesome.
I gotta say, we're gonna okay boomer this real quick, and I'm sorry that I'm gonna do this, but it's one of those in the snow both ways kind of speech. technology back then was like so new and so fresh. It was really cool to see the new stuff coming out and see what they did with the animation, with the gameplay, with mechanics, all this stuff. We don't see a lot of that anymore. You know what we see? We see people going back to that. We see people demaking stuff and being like,
Yeah.
hey, you know, it was really cool back then. Let's rotoscope this entire movie. Let's rotoscope this entire game like they did back then. And you're like, oh, this is like from 1989. There's no way this is from 1989. This is at least 2010. And it's not. And it's kind of, it's almost disappointing. Don't get me wrong. I love all the games that a lot of the new games are coming out are great, but there's not that je ne sais quoi, I guess you could call it. It's not that what's
Okay.
special about it.
Magic.
Like what is that?
Magic.
Okay.
That magic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's human condition this real quick. Follow me on this. This is to Chard's point. Have you ever had an NES game where, or whatever, you type in a cheat code or like a Game Shark code or a Game Genie code, and then you're completely OP'd and you're like, man, I want to go back and just play it without all the stuff and make it hard. So extrapolate that idea to kind of this. When you look at the technology available at the mid to late 80s in game development and like even movies, we had the same kind of thinking and imagination. It's part of the human condition of what can we do with this?
Mm-hmm.
How far can we take this? But it was much more limited there. Look at all the peripheral, things that came out for even just the NES or the Super Nintendo or the Genesis. The ideas are there, but the technology is limited. Now we have the ability to do all that and make it look good. It kind of is this embarrassment of riches where you're like, I want to go back to when shit was more difficult or
Right.
it was not quite there. And I
It
think
makes sense.
there's some magic there. And part of what is so special about Prince of Persia, and you guys mentioned this a minute ago very aptly, was the utility of it. The logic of the level design. Why would there be spikes
Yeah.
here? Why would there be this? Like, that's what was special to me about this, because, again, to look at it with the exception of how smooth the animation was, what is appealing about this game, really? It's not the soundtrack. The story is okay, but really it is the utility and the efficiency of design. And you didn't see that for a very long while.
It uses a lot of rational game design,
Yep.
which when there's rational game design, it feels good. You know, like you progress at a pace that you're like, I am making progress, and you're getting those brain juices going, right? The serotonin release or whatever, where you're like, I figured out this puzzle, right?
Right. But I mean, okay, and I just want to go back to make sure that that metaphor was understood. The Power Glove, for example, we had this idea as a collective species, right? What if we can do this? And the idea was that the technology was not. Prince of Persia is a very rare example of the idea was there, and this is the best possible execution of it. So that's all I was trying to say with that, because I know I go on tangents, but I wanted to tie that together for you guys.
Visually too, it's super impressive. I mean, you're looking at
For what it is,
you know, 3 to 5 frames of animation for most sprites in most games at the time, and then you get this where it's all rotoscoped, and you know, it looks like, you know, a platformer that looks like a Disney game. You know what I mean? It looks like a Disney movie as much as a game in 1989 can.
Right.
And it's very impressive for the time. And now we're at a point where, don't get me wrong, graphics are impressive, but it's like, you know, ambient occlusion, ray tracing. It's not, you know, leaps and bounds apart when you look at one visual versus the other. And so it's, while, you know, technically super impressive, visually, if you don't realize what you're looking at, you don't even notice it.
Right.
And
it's like, how can we make stuff now look realer? Like, how do we make it look like, so I'm looking out my window, I'm looking at my PC, and I can't tell the difference. You know?
Except we're also at a point. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't like the real world enough. I want to watch it on a screen.
We're also at a point though where, like, the more realistic something looks, sort of the creepier it gets.
Right. Yeah. This is way too real. I'm not a fan of this.
We're kind of having to reel it in to not look as realistic. Otherwise, it looks.
Am I going to jail?
It's not even Uncanny Valley anymore. It's something different.
Like some Black Mirror type stuff.
Yeah. Like, I think Spider-Man, here's a random tangent example of this, but I think Spider-Man on PS4 looks better than Spider-Man on PS5. Because the lighting and shadows and stuff do things, yeah, it does things to the 3D model. It reads differently, and it's kind of creepy and spooky looking. It almost gives you like, one is you're looking at a cartoon, and the other is you're looking at a ventriloquist dummy doing the talking. And I grew up with ventriloquist dummies, and they're still freaking creepy. They don't creep me out as much as most people, but if you put me in a room full of dummies by myself, I'm not happy.
You are in a room full of dummies by yourself, my friend.
Greatest thing anyone
reevaluate that.
Note to self: werewolf has a ventriloquist dummy phobia. Okay, cool.
But hung out with them as a child. So.
Can't wait for October.
So is this part of the episode where I can say how bad this game is? Are we ready for that part yet?
Oh shit! Yeah, let's give us the negatives here.
Like visually,
shit away, my friend.
It's visually impressive, absolutely. Is it inspiring a bunch of other games? Yeah, absolutely. But the controls are frustrating as hell. Like you have to take tiny baby steps to the edge of ledges. Like at the beginning of this episode, I'm watching poor Sinistar, who thank you for giving us the footage, suffered through an hour of playing this game. I saw the one sequence you're trying to jump up on the ledge. I couldn't even figure out how to do that out. It took me 20 minutes to figure out how to fucking hit a ledge. Meanwhile, you're taking baby steps, jumping, missing. Baby step, jumping, missing. Like, I get it. That's what other games going forward did, but they made it a lot better. But Prince of Persia is so frustrating to control, and it just feels terrible. It looks amazing, but it controls terribly. Like, I can't stand this game.
So,
is that not an allegory for life, though? Baby steps, failures, baby steps.
I thought it looks amazing, but it feels terrible.
But it feels wrong.
Do we need to go back last week and retcon and add this game to interfering interfaces?
Maybe
it would be a contender, absolutely. And like the SNES version, I think Sinister Offline, you were telling me how the SNES version with as an additional button. I think wasn't that
it added a jump button. It added a jump button that actually made it worse.
Yeah.
See, yeah, I don't think it interferes. Quite the opposite. I think it fears.
It fears. Definitely fears. I mean, is this a product of the game being so in its time, being as advanced as it was, or at least I wouldn't say advanced, but looking as good as it does, that we forget that the controls are still kind of antiquated for what we have, but we're so taken back by what it looks like during that time frame that we think, hey, I should be able to pick up my PS5 controller and just run with this thing. No problem. But they didn't have that back then. So is it one of those, like those double takes where we're like, wait a minute, this game is old. Like this game does have antiquated stuff, but it looks so good for its time. WTF?
Well, I have a question that I don't know that I can answer without having original hardware in the original game. But, so controllers had, single button back then. And so if you had an action button, you had to use that as the action button. And so that's part of why the controllers use the up arrow. But when I talked about using the number pad keys, I wonder if the Apple II back in the day didn't have enough rollover on the keyboard to handle multiple buttons at the same time.
That could
or
be.
more than two, because you do hold down an action button to do certain things.
Right.
But I wonder if it couldn't handle that third key press. Right.
That's
And
quite
That would
cool,
make sense.
'cause I think three keys was pushing it back on my Windows XP machine. And
Yeah.
It's
2000.
only
That's why they
recently
have
solved.
the jump forward and the jump back in two separate button locations, essentially on the keypad. That would make sense, because then you're just combining the two together, I guess, and just making it one push, so you didn't have to worry about the rollover.
Yeah, I
That
wonder
makes
if it's a rollover issue without having an Apple II in my. I mean, I have the Mr. Core, and I wonder if it can validate that. I'll have to look.
You heard it here first. If
Interesting
anybody's got an
thought.
Apple II lying around, just go ahead and send it over to Sinistar, and we'll test it here.
I will take it.
Mechner, if you're listening, I feel bad because I've already done the if you're listening bit, but
Maybe Robert Downer Jr. buys this one. I don't know. Maybe he's got one.
I don't know.
Apple
saying, he is
keyboards
Iron
have
Man.
a 4-key rollover on columns and a 6-key on rows. That's what it says in my Mind Palace.
In your Mind Palace?
It's
Yeah.
been a while since the Mind Palace has been.
Is that what it's
Reference.
called? My wife calls it shower math, and it's usually wrong.
Then you probably would be okay thinking about it. But Yeah.
This is a game that I feel like maybe I should give a shot on the NES or the Master System, because technical limitations are a little closer to what the Amiga and Apple II and all that were, and so they're not trying to make it look as pretty as possible like on the Super Nintendo and then failing miserably. And then it also has the limited control scheme with the tube action buttons and the D-pad. So I feel like it might be a happy medium between them. I'm going to have to try it on those and see what I think.
The version I heard to play is Sega CD, which actually has a voiced intro, which is interesting. But I heard it actually plays really well on the Sega CD. I think it's different than the Genesis version even, which is odd for that.
I think I heard that too.
Huh.
I want to mix a damage randomizer with the original Prince of Persia and Oregon Trail.
No, just the original Prince of Persia and all its various ports.
I was just gonna say that. Just play the ports, and you
No,
literally
that way you
have
just
the
get
same.
dropped into one now and then. No idea where you're at.
I'm with GP on this. I think that you should get the mix up where it says, "I'm sorry, those jaws closed on you and you died of dysentery."
Right, nice. Yeah, sorry for your guts.
You died of dysentery.
You died in dysentery.
Yeah.
That's
Alrighty, is there anything anybody else would like to say on this game before we wrap it up?
It looks pretty. That's about it.
I'm gonna
dropped.
No.
Oh no!
Oh, we pissed off Chard.
Chard.
Chard was like, nah.
I do want to say that I really did kind of appreciate, after playing it, you saw my videos, after playing it now 8 times through levels 2, I actually am going to go back and play it again. I know, Jake, you said the controls, but like for me, like that muscle memory kicked in. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily have that issue. I can see your point absolutely. Compared to modern gaming, it's an awful control scheme. But
I think for me, it's the problem with the controls is also carried over into Out of This World and Flashback to a degree, but it's the rest of those games. Sorry, it's the rest of those games that I like so much. Like Flashback as an overall experience, the controls is not what I like. It's everything else about it that I kind of like. Like I feel bad because when I tried Prince of Persia this week, I wanted to like it, knowing what an influence it was and how it's ported to everything. But I just, for what the game is, the time limit, which I don't like. The idea that you're playing this game multiple times to memorize the puzzle so you can beat it within the time limit. Mm-hmm. I just don't like that idea of a loop. And it's frustrating for me.
Mega Man. You play that over and over and over again.
This guy beats Mega Man once, and all of a sudden he's the Mega Man King.
I am the Mega Man Master of Chard. I told you that's my new title. But play Mega
Man 1 Master.
But you have 30 minutes to beat Mega Man 1. That's what it feels like. Memorize all the bosses, the best route, the best weapons, and you have 30 minutes to do it. That's what Prince of Persia feels like. The time limit really frustrates me. It's probably better on the SNES version because they give you 2 hours. Even if it is longer, it's still a generous time limit. But the other platforms, 60 minutes doesn't feel long enough unless you are meant to memorize everything. And I don't like that concept.
We should, by the way, in post, we should add a timer to this podcast, just like the...
But just cut it at 60 minutes, like in the middle of it?
Yeah.
And have it pop up on the screen with like 55 minutes left. Like,
right.
Just keep zooming in and zooming out. Just a
that
reminder.
Timer is the exact reason I will not play Majora's Mask.
Yeah, same reason. Hate it. It's the worst.
Sure.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Maybe not. Now Wolf's like, no, I'm not playing this anymore. Wolf, or AKA GP, in this particular version of the podcast.
Shit.
You close this out, sir.
There we go. I wanted to be GP for once.
I believe Chard noticed me looking at my.
I kept looking back at it.
Identity theft is not a joke.
That's my square.
You're gonna steal my identity, my credit score, all of it.
Change chairs, or is it change places?
My credit score.
Oh,
there we go.
Oh, wow.
What am I now?
Wow.
There you go.
Wow.
I know.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, motion sickness, guys.
I'll throw up.
Awesome.
All right. Let's go ahead and let the people know where we can be found. Sinistar.
So I am streaming most Mondays on Twitch, and I want to call out that after I complete Super Mario Brothers 1, I've said I'm going to play Super Mario World again, and then I am going to play through Prince of Persia.
Love it.
Oh. All right. And GP?
I'm
Yeah.
GP right now. We used to stream over at the Retro Therapy, but most of the time you'll catch me here. But we have some ideas about doing some charity events for the Retro Therapy, and as soon as we find out what we're going to do with that, we'll let everybody know. We're really excited about it.
Right on. And Sick Wolf.
Yeah, I am Sick Jake. You can find me eventually on Twitch. But what I've been doing lately is I did beat my Sisyphean game, Mega Man 1 for the NES. And then, not satisfied, I went and beat Mega Man 1 on Wily Wars. And to further toot my own horn, I also beat Mega Man 1 powered up on the PSP. You could say that I am the greatest Mega Man player of all fucking time. And that will be my title
Mega Man
going
1.
forward. Thank you.
You
Although
heard
I played
it, cool
Mega Man
kid.
2 and died in
Sick
like
Jake's
5
coming
minutes.
for you.
Yeah.
Sick Jake, are we getting the exclusive? Are you challenging Cool Kid to
Wow.
a runoff?
Oh,
That's,
You know
that's
how
what I'm
many hours
hearing.
it took me to beat
We're
those
having
games?
a mega off.
You know what it was? I was sick, so for the entire weekend, I spent like 30 hours playing all the Mega Man 1 games. That's what it was. It took forever to beat the Yellow Devil in every iteration of that game. It's brutal. But anyway, videos
30
on
hours,
YouTube.
that is
Go
one-
check it out.
That is one hell of an anti-speed run.
Yes, that's me. Anti-speed runner.
It's a speed walk. I want to do a damage randomizer of just 7 different versions or 7 different files of Mega Man 1.
You can if you really want
That's
to.
like the Prince of Persia damage run.
There you go.
It's just different save states. Just throw you around.
Nick was just doing the mellow saunter.
On your left.
I hate it here.
I get that reference. And GP.
No, Jordan nailed it.
I nailed
Everything
it.
he said earlier, yeah.
I was hoping GP was going to do my outro. I'm super vain and I'm everywhere. Find me there.
Yeah, if you can't find me, ask anybody else on the internet. They know who I am. They'll send you over. Final Fantasy forever.
Wow.
And I'm Werewolf. I can be found mostly here, doing a little YouTube soon. I keep saying that. Soon, TM.
I've been there.
He's
And
got to get
this
his
has been-
respect. He's got to go get his respect.
No.
This has
I love your
been
hair.
Press B to... Oh. Press B to cancel.
Good night, everybody.
I'm Sinistar right now.